All right, now that we have at least 5 layers and we've got them all into one file, now is a good time to save. Even though it looks like some of the images are cropped off, and if I move them, you can see more than you can fit, all the information is there. So now is a great time to save. It's like a stack of resources. So I say File, Save As, use my name, and I'm going to call this Cartoon Jumble. First, make sure you save it as a PSD. You don't want it to flatten all your layers. So this is a Photoshop format. It supports layers to the desktop. If it's anywhere else, hit Command D to navigate it to the desktop. This will help those of you who have computers that are running slowly too, to save and consolidate. And then at that point, if you need to, you can restart Photoshop if it's giving you issues. Okay, now, what do I do? Well, I'm going to turn off all my layers except for the background layer. And I do that using these little eyeballs. It's very similar to what we played with in Pixlr. This is my base layer. I would like a little bit more space around it. Even though this is already a high enough resolution to print well, I want more space. So to do that, it doesn't even matter what layer you have selected. I go up to Image within Photoshop, and not image size, because I don't want to change the resolution of the image I stole. Instead, I want canvas size. I want to change the size of the paper. And mine right now is 41 by 48 inches. That sounds really large, but it's probably at a low pixel per inch. But I'm going to make it bigger. So I'm going to make it 60 by, that's going to make it wider by 80. And I want my canvas extension color, if it gives me the option, to be white. So that gives me a little bit more paper space, which allows for these other layers to fit in pretty well. Some of them are still too big, just because they're really long. But I'll be playing with that. Okay, my problem right now is that I've got all of these. Now I've got a nice big paper space to arrange them all on, but they're not transparency. They're not looking like there are Arturo Herrera overlaps of lines that I want. So what I need to do now, before I mess with individual layers and change their size and change their angle, I need to take every layer except for my background layer, turn it on, and then change its mode, its layer mode, from normal to what is called multiply. And multiply turns it into a transparency. So anything that's darker underneath will come through. And as I do that, it's like stacking up transparencies. And when I do this with patent office stuff, I feel very high tech. Feel like I could have been an engineer, Dad. So what you do, you select the layer, turn it on, and then change it to multiply mode. Now this might look like a cartoon jumble. This might look very artistic, but you have done very little to create this image, right? The only thing we've done is chosen the order of them and then made them all transparent. So now comes the artistic part. We turn off all the layers again except for the background. And we turn on our first layer. We select it, and now we make some artistic decisions. And we do that through one magic shortcut, which is the most important shortcut to learn today, and we're going to be using it a lot, and it's Command T. It is a free transform shortcut. So Command T, click it, and all of a sudden you get this beautiful, what's called a transform box around your image. And if I click outside of the transform box, left left click and move around, I can rotate the image. If I click on any of these little anchors at the corners and I hold down Shift, which is pretty important because that will lock the proportions, I can scale the image up or down. And I'm trying to find what looks cool with the other image, what angle, what size. And if I use these side anchors, I can even not only warp it to be skinnier or wider, which I wouldn't recommend for this project because we're trying to maintain the line quality, but I could flip it on its axis like this and reverse it if I wanted to, like flipping a negative. And then to make any of those changes permanent, you hit return. So as long as they're in the transform box that you get by hitting Command T, you can play with it and nothing is permanent until you hit return. Okay, now the next layer. Take all this information, hit Command T, rotate it, hold down Shift, scale it bigger or smaller, decide what parts I want, what parts I don't want. And you can do Command T as many times as you like. And then hit return to lock in your transformations. You do that for each layer today and you'll be in good shape for next class. Remember to hold down Shift when you're doing size changes. And if you want it not to grow from the corner but to grow from the center, you can hold down Shift and Option, and it will grow from the center of the image instead of from one edge. But Shift is important. Now, what does this mean if you're doing characters? Well, you don't want all your characters' heads to be at the top and all their feet to be at the bottom. You want to treat them like they're painted lines. You're playing with dynamics, with angles. You're playing with orientation. And you have to use at least 5 references. But in the next demo, we'll play with erasing and removing content. We don't need to keep everything that we saved. All right. So once you have organized the transformations, it's a good idea to save it. And you can just do File, Save at that point, because we already named it with our name. And that will update our PSD file. So now that I have them all stacked, I have them all on multiply mode, I have them all rotated and scaled in ways that are interesting, I'm noticing that some areas of my composition just feel way saturated and have an overabundance of imagery. And especially this one on top, there's a little too much going on that distracts. So how do I take away information? How do I take away pixels? Well, I'm going to do that with the Lasso Tool, which is just 2 under the Move tool. And you want to make sure that you're on just the regular Lasso tool, because that works the most like cutting something out with an X-Acto knife. And using my stylus, I'm just going to click and draw a shape that I want to remove. So let's say I don't like this hard edge right here. I'm going to loop around it swoop down.
What layer do we have to be on?
You have to be selected on the layer that you want to delete from. So I'm on layer 5, and if I turn layer 5 on and off, that's what I'm looking at, and I want to remove this chunk. You'll see that once I've made the selection, it looks like a little line of marching ants, and then I just hit the delete button on my computer. And you see it will remove that section. Now, editing is incredibly important when you're doing compositing. And this is, unlike everything we've done so far, this is an extremely creative decision, deciding what to keep and what to leave out. If I were doing Snoopy or Garfield or any characters like Arturo Herrera likes to do with Disney characters, the first thing he'll edit out are the eyes and the faces, because that really gives away what the character is, and he wants you to instead just look at the line quality. But especially in these top layers, I can be a little bit more random in how I edit, just drawing shapes and deleting and deciding how they go. It can be fun to make them start and stop and share lines. Now my lines are quite complicated here, but what that makes it look like is that this is now on top of this. And so I'm looking at just what's the movement I want from this piece. Now there's two things this helps us practice. It helps us practice making selections and using them, but then it helps us deselect. So we can deselect in two ways. We can click somewhere else, or we can hit Command D. So clicking somewhere else will deselect, or clicking Command D will deselect. But before you deselect, make sure that you like what you erased. In this case, I like what I erased here, but I don't like that I lost the little figure there. So I can hit Command Z to go back before I deleted it, and then I can redraw what I want to delete. And then I think again, I say, maybe I don't want that figure 5. So I'm just kind of clarifying this a little bit. And then you would do that with your other layers as well. So now I'm going to drop down to my next layer. It's up to you if you want to turn off layers as you do this or not. But just to show you what I did, I vastly cut out from that. So now I have something that's more to my own creative tastes. And if you want to build it up from the bottom, you can certainly do that. So here's my first layer, and now I want to start editing that. I also look for horizontals and verticals, and I tend to like to get rid of those. You can still transform as you go as well. Because now that you know you can delete from it and get rid of offensive material, you might make slightly different decisions as you resize then rotate them. And this is just playing around. There's not right ways to do it. Just seeing what you can come up with. If there's any chunks falling off to the side, you definitely want to delete those.